Already my team here have started looking at the finance bill that has just collapsed, the 2024 finance bill, picking out those areas which largely are not controversial or would not hurt the common mwananchi in terms of tax burden, and which can help us, A, improve the economy. You know, when the economy improves, we'll definitely collect more.
All right, that is the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, John Mbadi, talking about what can be done, especially the non-controversial clauses that were in the Finance Bill 2024, sort of salvaging that situation. But remember, alongside that, there is the contentious issue of the Finance Act 2023, which the Court of Appeal nullified. We understand there has been notice of motion at the Supreme Court, but of course there are no directions as to whether that decision is stayed, meaning it should be implemented as is as of now, unless there is a different direction from the Supreme Court. But as we were going to the break, Governor, you were talking about how counties should not get a reduction of resources. But, Chairman, I see that the National Assembly may have actually enacted an amendment or passed an amendment bill, that is Division of Revenue Amendment Bill 2024, reducing the allocation to the counties by 20 billion shillings. And I remember you were talking about this being almost a unilateral decision being taken. The governor feels, at least, even if you have to reduce, take them to 385, which was existing with the Finance Act 2023. What should happen in such a situation?
Well, I mean, there are two aspects to it which the Honourable Senator and His Excellency the Governor have referred to. Of course, there is the legal route in terms of, including a judicial process of rectifying the situation. But, in running a country, that is not the best way, especially at the level we are talking about. It is one thing going judicial at individual levels and corporate levels. But at the government level, it should not be that. It's just that there should be a honest conversation between the parties. I think between the Senate and the National Assembly, but also at the center of all these are the county governments. But the county governments are the center on behalf of the people they serve, and which are the same people served by the national government. When you don't give the counties sufficient resources, it means, therefore, basic services are not being delivered. It means, therefore, the government, because to the ordinary people, the government is one, and in any case, anyway, we have a government at two levels. Therefore, the conversation needs to be very candid. Where do we want to be in terms of the things, the functions, the services which counties are giving? If you are not giving them the 20 billion shillings, what is not going to happen for the citizens? Is it that there will not, probably there will be counties where there is no medicine in the hospitals? Is it that there are places where ECD facilities will not be operating properly in the counties? So it is not an individual county issue, it is not an individual leader's issue, it is a national issue. And therefore, conversation should be there between the parties involved. And in any case, if you are going, it is a dictum in our constitution now that you don't do anything which involves a stakeholder without the participation of that stakeholder. That's why we talk about public participation. If there is public participation generally, then even more important is the participation of stakeholders at the level at which, you are redoing the budget, you are redoing the laws. So that, I think, is a very important, that a mechanism is found that there is a conversation about this. Okay. As Honourable Senator here has said, if we are going to do the changes in the DORA, let's go to the IBEC first, and let the conversation start there at the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council, where all parties are involved and they are discussing these things. And I remember to get the budget of 385 billion for the last financial year, there were a lot of conversations. There was we moved from the conversation in the summit of the president and the governors, and we went to conversations at other levels. by the time we got to 385.
Yeah.
Therefore, everybody was involved. And I think, therefore, that kind of conversation needs to take place now. I shouldn't have taken place yesterday.
So you haven't heard of it at the ABEC?
No, we haven't had any. That has not been discussed in the ABEC yet.
Okay. Senator,
yes. If I may clarify something.
Yep.
I want to put it on record that I didn't say we're comfortable with 385.
Yep.
I was just showing the eagerness with which Treasury was willing to reduce funds.
Yeah.
That once these headwinds were encountered with respect to the finance bill, they just actually went even beyond what we had last year when there was no evidence that they were going to collect beyond, less than what was we had last year.
Okay.
But what we're saying is the 400 figure for us was actually low with respect to the requirement of counties.
Yes.
Two, that number of 400 was not based on budget estimates. It was not based on projections. The ceiling for counties is based on last audited and approved accounts, which are themselves historical because we're not keeping pace in terms of auditing and approving those accounts. So how we come in, because projections have fallen, we can't really understand. When in the first place, we were not allocated on the basis of those projections or estimates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 20 billion, as I said,
yeah,
is a big number to counties because they're really struggling. All counties are struggling. But in spite of the challenges, it's a number that the national government can manage.
All right.
By postponing even one project to next year. Right? So leave us at the 400 if you can add us more. That's our request.
I'm just wondering, Senator, so this cut, because eventually you have to work on the County Allocation of Revenue Act.
Yes.
Is the cut going to be equitable or flat?
When I ended earlier on when I was making comments on this same issue, I was making reference to the fact that we are dealing with a situation where we had certain projections in terms of, I would say, collections at the national level that will ultimately lead to the division to the counties, which projections, owing to now the withdrawal and rejection of the finance bill, are no more.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we have now received at the Senate the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill by the National Assembly, which was actually in the order paper last week.
Yeah.
We haven't debated it. We definitely will have got to look at it and debate it. For purposes of this program, then, that is already part of the bill that has been introduced in the Senate, having been passed as an amendment at the National Assembly. And that passage has equally reduced the allocations to the county governments, actually by now 20 billion, which is around 5.4% from what had previously been passed. So from 400, it's come to 380. It has given its justifications, of course, which we are yet to debate as the Senate. I probably wouldn't want to preempt the debate on that particular item in the Senate. Similarly, they have equally also, because we are dealing with a motion at the moment now on an amendment to the equalization fund appropriation of the county governments, which also is a reduction of what we previously passed as the Senate. So in all, there is a reduction in allocations under the Division of Revenue and now the Equalization Fund. So the Division of Revenue equitable share is now going to reduce, as per this particular proposal by the National Assembly, by 20%. And that gives us the figure is around, the figure is 380, actually, yeah, the governor put it very well, 380 billion, which is reduced. And this is justified by the global figure of a reduction in the entire budget of
that's fine.
346 billion. Now, as Senate,
You mean on taxes?
Yes, on taxes.
There's something I want to, or rather the revenues. There's something I need to get there. You're saying the equalization fund is also being reduced?
Yes.
Separately from the 20 billion?
Yes. This is a...
How much is it?
The equitable share is, of course, the one on 380.
Yes.
This was coming to 356. I'll need to get the figures, but there is a reduction of almost a similar percentage on the equalization fund appropriation.
And
which we're dealing with the motion.
Yeah,
yes.
and therefore, you haven't answered my question whether the reductions in the CARA will be equitably or equally. But as you do that, then what happens to costing of functions, financing of functions? Because you'd expect that you're allocating resources, even when you are doing mediation between the Senate and the National Assembly, the idea would have been about ensuring that you have sufficient resources to finance the functions in the counties.
Of course, and some, we are not saying, or rather I am not saying that Senate is entirely going to say we are okay with 380. We are here to protect devolution. And one of the things that we will definitely be doing as a Senate is to push for additional allocation to the Senate. That is why we previously pushed from 380 to 400. Remember, in the justification that is coming from the National Assembly, they are saying the 380 billion which we are allocating to the counties is actually way above the constitutional threshold of 15% of the resources of the county. So to them, that justification is in place that, you know what, we have complied with the constitutional threshold. Two is the aspect of now the reduced, I mean, we had projections and we had a national budget, but for what transpired, leading to the rejection of the bill, we then cannot project our budget and disbursements to the counties with a figure that we don't have. But we are saying as a Senate, we must protect devolution. How do we do it? We must allocate them funds sufficient, or even at least within the context of the justifications we previously had, we also are supposed to make sure that we give them that resource. The challenge that we have, which we must also, as a matter of fact, ask ourselves, is the fact that we are aware of the situation as is at the national and in the global economic situation about resources. And therefore, even when we are pushing as a Senate to make sure that we enhance resources being allocated to the counties, we also need to be alive to the fact that we're dealing with a very stringent situation that everyone else is saying, let's try to live within our means. And this could also be one of the messages that we will share with the counties, that however much we will be pushing to make sure that we do not get a reduction of this. Remember, actually, from the platform that we previously had, where the public engagement between, of course, the chairman here, IBEC, the public participation, and also now the ultimate figure that we had, it was not 400. We needed to push for more for the counties. Ultimately, we landed at 400. Now we are coming down to 380. So we have a challenge. That, as a fact, we have a challenge with regard to resources. But again, as a rider, one of the reasons as to why sometimes also we have this as a conversation that is cutting across is we do not, in some instances, have a feeling of these funds going to the county level. There's a lot of devolved corruption. There's a lot of devolved misuse of these resources, such that in as much as we are pushing for enhanced allocation to the counties, there is a rider to it that we wish we could feel the effect of these monies.
Okay.
Right now, we're struggling with the resources that has already been disbursed to the counties. As Senate, CPAC and CPIC, where the Honorable His Excellency Governor appears, I'm not saying him, but he knows the concerns that the Senate has raised. From where I come from, Bomet, we have got a lot of problems.
That's a different problem.
Of course, it is a different problem, but we are saying sometimes when you sit back, you want to push for. But then you want to also make sure that, you know, it's sort of a carrot and stick.
You're fearing if you get so much, it will be stolen.
Not really stolen.
Answer that question you noted down. Equal or equitable?
Equitable.
Equitable.
Yes,
okay.
equitable. Right. Oh, sorry about that. It's equitable.
All right. Chairman, I want us, as we build up on the conversation, so I think it was January 2023, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there was a summit, the Governor Summit, of course, together with the President. And,
February.
It was February 2023.
February 11.
Oh, thank you for that. And it was agreed that there would be unbundling of functions so that they are transferred together with accompanying resources.
Yes.
And I think a report was done, but implementation keeps being delayed. Now we're hearing of conversations of zero-based budgets, which may also impact on the counties. Maybe you can begin by telling us on the progress of the unbundling of those functions and where we stuck.
We did complete the unbundling and actually gazetted transfer of those functions sometime in November of 2023.
Yeah.
But, you know, we got a pushback from the stakeholders, ministries, departments, and agencies who felt that they had not been consulted enough and that they had issues. Although in some important respects, it was also to do with not understanding that the transfer of functions does not immediately mean things stop at that particular point. So on that basis, when we had the last summit meeting in December, on December 18th, it was agreed that we need to redo the exercise. His Excellency the President gave us a 2-month deadline to complete the revision and to consult all the parties involved in this. And so we again, as IGRTC, reconvened all the sector technical task teams, which had arrived at the previous unbundling and the transfer of the functions. We did finish that exercise in February. There were still areas where we could not agree. I mean, not many actually, very few areas where the county governments and the state departments and ministries did not agree. And they are really very few. So on the basis of the conversations we had with the presidency, I mean the Office of the Deputy President and Office of Head of Public Service and the governors, we agreed we will gazette the transfer of those for which there are no issues. Because they are just about 6 or so areas. And they are, in a sense, sometimes some of them are marginal. It's about marine game reserves. It's about artisanal mining, who will license them, and so on. So just a few of those kind of issues.
Yeah.
It's about also the issue of who controls the issues of mapping and surveying of land and so forth. So there were a number of those, about 6 areas in which we were facilitating and coordinating the 2 levels of government to agree. So we did 13 legal notices which need to be therefore effecting the transfer. And early May, we did submit those legal notices for usual, what I would have thought was routine clearance by the Office of the Attorney General. But we've been pushing for them to come out of the Attorney General's office, and we have not been successful, and I cannot even explain why. But we are, you know, I mean, and I've not been told that they are not going to be cleared. I think at one stage they did ask us, did you involve, was there public participation in this and so on? And we told them, well, we public already agreed that these functions should go to the county government. So what we are doing does not involve it. And in any case, anyway, we also involved them in the drafting of the legal notices. So that is where we are.
The of the Attorney General is involved in the drafting.
Oh, yeah. Everything we did in this whole exercise, including putting together an amendment bill to reverse some, to which would repeal or amend some 96 of current pieces of current registration. We did that with a multi-agency team of lawyers, including the Office of the Attorney General, the Kenya Law Reform Commission, the state departments concerned. They brought in their lawyers. Who have we not involved? The Council of Governors, of course, also, and its lawyers there. So, and we even consulted constitutional lawyers, you know, like Nyachai and so on, to tell us, you know, are we doing it right? So,
and would you know how many functions we are talking about that you are cleared for transition?
Okay, we actually now talk about elements of functions because the Constitution actually transferred the function.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And there were also subsequent legal notices to effect those transfers. So the unbundling identified some 541 elements of functions. that needed to be transferred to the county governments by ministries, departments, and agencies. Let me also add that, on the other hand, two important things to take cognizance as we talk about this. First, it is very clear, it was very clear in the beta plan. It was also very clear in the president's inaugural address of his commitment to this transfer. It's been very clear in the subsequent summit meetings. And it is clear in the sense that from the pronouncements of His Excellency the President, both at the devolution conference last year, at the summit meeting, in the President's mind, it's very clear that devolution needs to work for this country to get socio-economic transformation at the pace at which we need it. Okay, so devolution needs to work. And this is part of it, of getting it to work. So, but you know...
Did you cost those elements?
We did not. We only did an initial budget review in fiscal year, in the initial exercise. We had done some initial review to what extent would the funds need to move from counties, from the national government to counties, and about 270 billion shillings or 272 billion we had identified would probably need to move from national to ministries, departments. And again, we are not talking about a one-day event. We are talking about a process, in which the two levels of government would be involved. For the current level, for the 541, now I think we have the Council of Governors has requested that the Commission for Revenue Allocation does the costing of those functions, and that exercise, CRI has embarked on, and we are collaborating with them in that exercise to identify what are the cost implications of it. The only caveat to all that is that obviously in a situation where we have all these fiscal constraints at both levels of government, it is not likely that we shall be able to do allocation of resources by actual cost of what it would require for us to develop, to give the optimal quality of service in that regard.
All right, Chairman, thank you for that update. So, Vice Chair, what is the problem here? Why are things not moving despite the promises, the many meetings that have been held, and the legal notices submitted?
Thank you, Sam. Sam, allow me to begin with the legality or otherwise of the revision of the Division of Revenue Act. There is a Supreme Court opinion, advisory opinion, number 3 of 2019. I think in 2019, the Council of Governors, together with the 47 counties, had gone to court again with, respect to this matter of division and allocation of revenue. And it's very clear, because this advisory came out just the other day, that the national government cannot purport to consummate or complete its Budget and Appropriation Act without a Division of Revenue Act. There is already a Division of Revenue Act in place, which was signed by and assented by the President on the 10th of June of this year. How the National Assembly went ahead and revised the Budget and Appropriation Act of national government, and thereby reducing the county's allocation by 20 billion without first inquiring whether it's legal or otherwise to amend the Division of Revenue Act, we don't know. And that's the issue that we have at hand. Two, I was waiting for the response of the chair to the issue of the costing of those 541 functions, and indeed he's a truthful man, because he clearly said, yes, there was 270, actually I think if I remember right, it was 272 billion that ought to now have moved from national government to counties with respect to those functions that have been devolved and transferred, but elements of which were retained at the national level. Now you can see how much it will have taken the county revenues too. If you add the 400 and to the 272 to that 400, then we're actually saying counties should be receiving something in the region of 700 billion shillings if we have to comply with the constitution that we gave ourselves as a country, which devolved those functions to the counties. And here we are debating a reduction of 20 billion from the 400, which came through a tough mediation process between the two houses of Parliament. So the challenge we have really here is one of constitutionalism, that we gave ourselves a robust constitution, which we promulgated in 2010 and implemented through elections for the first time at county level in 2013. But as a country, there is resistance to change, and we don't want to fully comply with that constitution. Then there is the matter that is always raised of devolved corruption. Sam, there's a few things that we need to put into context. In spite of the challenges of money and the question of debt, and which we have actually been raising as a Council of Governors since my first term, I was in the first cohort of governors. That the question of debt was being mismanaged by national government, and that debt was being used to front load allocation to national government. And this is how we moved our debt from 1.6 or 1.8 trillion in the last year of Kibaki administration to 11 trillion now. And this is impacting on everyone, and service delivery. And I do understand what the current president is grappling with, he finds himself, I think, in the wrong place at the right time, I guess, and is having to deal with these issues now. Yet no one is asking how we got here, and we've been saying these things. Having said that, counties on average get about 10% of the budget of the country. 10% of the total budget estimates of the country, which works to about 15%. Actually, if we crunch the numbers correctly, we're probably getting 14.78%
of the revenue
of the shareable revenue. Shareable revenue. And then it's been made to appear that corruption in counties is what is bringing down this country. Of that number of about 10% of the budget estimates, or 15% thereabout of the shareable revenue, the Commission of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission was on record saying that on average counties spend 50% of their revenues on salaries. So if we were to take 50% of 10%, that's 5% that remains for everything else. For the medicines, for the fuel, for everything else that we do, for the development that we have. How much of that does it contribute to the whole thing of corruption at national level? I am not saying there's no corruption at county level. And corruption is at every level. If you look at today's headlines here of the Nation, it says scandal of Kenya's athletes talent drain, where the managers of athletics in Kenya have been accused of draining our talent by selling our top athletes to other countries. It's a societal issue that we need to deal with at every single level. So this idea that every time the counties ask for what is constitutionally theirs, being accused of corruption will not solve our corruption problem as a country. Let's deal with corruption on a case-by-case basis, on its own merit. Let's not politicize it. One of our experts as ODM that we gave to the national government the other day is on record when he was being vetted in Parliament that he was accused of corruption, and when they went to his house, what he was being asked about was his involvement in demonstrations. That's what CS Oparanya said in his vetting, that it had nothing to do with how we ran Kakamega County. So let's deal with corruption and mismanagement, because sometimes it's not even about corruption, it's about incompetence and mismanagement. And let's, as a practitioner in the space of audit and accounting, There's a lot I can say even about how we can carry out our audits and how we see them through, how we close them as a country. It will not suffice to say that we will not send money to counties because there's corruption in counties. We had a president who said we're losing 2 billion shillings every day to corruption. 2 billion times 365 days is close to 800 billion shillings. Counties are still getting half of that and spending half of that on salaries. Let's put things into context.
Interesting. And Senator, I want to have the reply as we transition the topic on those unbundling of functions, the transfer of the 541 elements, so much so that the Senate has been around all this time. Have you expressed yourselves as to how soon this needs to be done? Because there's a cost implication, the resources that would be necessitated. Of course, Chairman says that CRA is working on how much the 541 elements would cost. But what have you been up to in enhancing this?
Tom, under Article 96, the mandate of the Senate is to protect devolution. Protecting devolution includes supporting unbundling of all functions which are supposed to be committed to the county governments. And when you look at the fourth schedule to the Constitution, it is in black and white. It's provided for which functions are meant to be performed by the county governments.
Right.
And when chairperson here gives us statistics of the functions which are yet to be developed, it is something that the Senate has already spoken to. The challenge, and which is now the elephant in the house, is costing of these functions. Because we say you cannot release, you cannot unbundle these functions to the county governments without commensurate release of resources. And talking about over 240 billion being the possible cost of these functions will definitely mean that we are yet to achieve that which our constitution requires us to do. Yeah. The most unfortunate thing which we have over time been unable to, take it head on is the fact that we have a very robust constitution which we promulgated in 2010. It is a good one for that matter, but very expensive, that we must accept. And we are a bit shy to accept the fact that though this is a very progressive constitution that we passed in 2010, looking to the future, we are shy to accept the fact that it is so expensive that we cannot achieve its demands. Because one of the reasons as to why some of these functions...
You're saying we can't achieve?
I'm saying in the immediate, but of course now it is something that is progressive, so much that these provisions are progressively being implemented, including now complete unbundling of these functions. And we are lucky the president fully supports devolution. That I can say. Would
zero-based budgeting help anything here?
By the way, it will. Yeah. It will help it because you see, when you look at the zero-based, I would call it budget, which we are now going to look at it as a transformative approach to how we utilize our resources. It is not going to be looking at the incremental, the previous one would be looking at annual percentage increment of what we have. Here we are looking at entities giving a justification of what they intend to do, how they intend to do, then place a budget on it, and we will be able to say we will achieve what we've budgeted for because of this particular proposal on the reserve-based. I look at it being one that will actually enhance efficiency, reduce also budgeting where you do not have resources, because a lot of the commitments that we do now are not implemented because we are unable to do so because of budgetary constraints. So I'm looking at it being one of, it's most likely going to. All right. It will actually do.
All right. And let's transition the topic and listen to what,
can I?
Yes, you will.